The loneliest place in the world is being the most capable, the most developed person in almost every room that you walk into. And that's not because capability or consciousness is a burden. And it's not that you're arrogant or you think that you are better. You would be the last person to orient that way. But it is because most rooms aren't being built for who you are and what you're carrying, the standard that you hold for yourself, the depth that you're available for, the quality of work and presence and commitment you bring as a matter of course, not performative, just how you operate. Most environments can't meet that. And after a while, you stop expecting them to. What I want to talk about today is what happens when they finally do. There's a story the performance world tells about why capable people plateau. And the story goes, you need more structure, you need more accountability, you need a better system, you need the right coach, the frameworks that you haven't found yet. There's something missing, and the answer is to find it and to add it. And that story might be true for a while, early in any developmental arc. The gap is really about acquisition. You don't have the skill yet, so you build it. You don't have the discipline yet, so you install it. Addition is the right move. And the content built around that premise works too, for the person it was built for. We have walked that path, we have built it as well. But there's a person for whom that story stopped being true a long time ago. They have the skill, they have the discipline, they've put in years of genuine work, and they have the results and the track record to show for it. And that person is still now hitting an invisible ceiling that is very hard for them to explain. And that nothing they have added has actually moved that ceiling. So the performance world's answer to that person is still add something. And that's the misdiagnosis, and it's costly. But not because the tools are bad, but the wrong tool applied to the right problem doesn't just fail to help. It creates noise. It gives the appearance of movement and change while the actual thing underneath stays stuck. That's actually what's happening when it isn't a deficiency of tools. What is needed is a different kind of terrain. Now, I'm going to give the metaphor of mountaineering, right? So from couch potato to base camp, well, that requires a specific set of skills and capability, right? It's worthy work, it's real work. But let's say that we are summiting Everest, right? Going from base camp Everest to summit of Everest, well, that is categorically a different challenge. The air is thinner, the margins are smaller, the conditions change in ways that lower altitude or couch potato to base camp will just didn't prepare you for. And what gets tested up there at altitude isn't what you know or just what you can execute under normal conditions. It takes a different kind of training. It's what you do when the plan falls apart. It's who you are when instinct has to take over, when the result is not guaranteed and there is nothing in your strategy or your stack that quite applies. That is not a base camp problem, and it won't be solved with base camp solutions. I'm going to be playful around this idea of addition being always the solution. And I want to give a name to something that the dominant culture of performance is operating under right now. I'm going to call it Optimaxxing, double X. The double X is intentional because this is the internet's own shorthand for taking something to its most extreme conclusion, looks maxing, sleep maxing, grind maxing. So Optimaxxing is what happens when the drive to develop meets an unlimited supply of things to add. Cold plunges, red light panels, peptide stacks, HRV tracking, the newest breathwork protocol, the next certification, the framework from someone with impressive credentials and a little stamp on their website, and a really good microphone. It's always the next thing. And I want to be careful here because some of that is genuinely useful. The issue isn't the individual tool. The issue is the orientation underneath of the accumulation. Optimizing is compounded acquisition by nature. So there's always something next available. And underneath that reaching pattern, if you sit with it honestly, there is usually a quiet relationship with inadequacy or even impatience. The next thing temporarily quiets something until it doesn't. And then there's a next thing. And let me tell you, the shelf help industry is going to bring that next thing across your feed again and again, like a conveyor belt of more noise. So here's the thing worth naming about Optimaxxing. And this is another point worth naming when I'm being playful about this term Optimaxxing. This is not about where someone is at in their development. It's not about being a beginner or being advanced. Someone can be 20 years in and still caught in this next paradigm. The distinction isn't experience, it's orientation. It's the relationship that someone has with their own development, whether it's coming from lack or from something else entirely. So the Optimaxer is externally referenced. The metric needs to move. The before and after needs to materialize like time now. When the work gets long or it's uncertain or it's unquantified right now. When there's no clear feedback loop confirming whether it's working. The fuel runs out. And because the fuel was never internally oriented, it was always the next thing that is going to provide the secret solution. But here's what Optimaxxing genuinely cannot tell you. What you're made of when the variables change, when instinct has to take over, and when conditions shift and nothing in your current orientation seems to apply. Skills can be taught and they can be developed, and we develop some of those skills. But what runs underneath of those skills? What determines how a person actually performs when skill alone isn't enough? That is not on any optimization menu. That is what we mean when we say somatic patterns. If you're curious to get oriented to our way of working and seeing, and you might be resonant with our approach, a great place to start getting to know us is our Somatic Skins Quiz. You can find a link below. It is a real first step of a diagnostic tool that we use with real people, real high performers every day. And we have made that first step available to you for free. So you can go down there and take it. Once you take it, you'll not only have your breakdown of your native genius, the way that your nervous system breaks down under pressure, but also a possible next step in your developmental arc. It isn't the end all and be all, right? But check your email after. You'll receive an ebook with more information. And then over the course of the next week, a few letters personally and directly from us that orient you to what the hell we're doing here, who we are, why we operate this way. And that can be a great place for us to start getting to know one another. Anyhow, back to the point. What runs underneath of skill? What determines your performance, how you show up when skill alone isn't enough? What's that thing underneath? We call it the source point. The source point is the ground from which your choices come when no one is watching. When the culture says it doesn't matter. When the result isn't guaranteed and there's no external structure providing any reason to show up. It is also what you are moving toward. You're pulled by a higher vision of yourself, a truer version, not because you are deficient as you are. This is an important distinction, but because you are devoted to who you are becoming, no matter how long it takes. No matter what the culture today says about what counts or doesn't count. You just know internally, you will be that person. You will do that thing. That's not optimization. Optimization asks, how do I get more? The source point asks, Who am I becoming? And am I living in alignment with that today, in this moment, when it would be easier not to? Those are not the same question, and they don't produce the same kind of life. You can feel the difference in the body, and I mean that literally. Optimaxxing has a reaching quality, a forward lean. The body is always extending toward the next thing, and it can feel quite alive, almost addictive. There's a genuine energy in acquisition. But over time, it's borrowed aliveness. It depends on there always being a next thing to reach for. And the moment that structure falls away, so does the fuel. The source point has a different quality. It's settled but not complacent. It's rooted but not stagnant. And it isn't passive. There's nothing passive about devotion, but it moves from the ground rather than just towards the next grasp. And it doesn't deplete the energy in the same way because it isn't drawing from an external cultural source. All right, let me deviate from the immediate topic for a moment. I want to speak to the person who has spent years being this kind of source point capable person in the room, who has held a standard that most environments around them couldn't match, who has done the work consistently, sincerely, often without acknowledgement, and has felt at some point the particular kind of exhaustion of being surrounded by rooms that were not built for who they are and what they are carrying. Maybe if you are this, you've been told that you're too intense, you're too focused, you're too serious about things, you're unreasonable. Other people treat things casually that you are deeply committed to. And maybe you've tried the Optimaxxing route and you've felt the hollowness of it. The metrics moving while something essential stayed untapped. And maybe, just maybe, you've been quietly waiting. Not for permission, not for motivation, but for a place that could finally meet you. I want you to know that this kind of room exists. And I want you to hear, not as reassurance, but as a factual statement about your situation, is that the ceiling that you've been hitting is not a ceiling on your capability, but it might be a ceiling on your environment. The rooms that you've been in, even for your own development, perhaps weren't built for a different kind of altitude of training. The tools available in those rooms were calibrated for a different stage, a different place of development, a different kind of work. And so you're not behind, but maybe you are now at base camp and you've been ready for the summit. And what you've been missing is that terrain and that training and the people that are built for that specific kind of ascent, be it professionally or personally. There is something that the Optimaxx world gets quietly wrong about development at this level, because it'll treat environment as optional, a nice addition, the right podcast in your ears, the next right book on your shelf, the occasional event that leaves you charged, right, for a week before daily life overtakes it again. But fundamentally, in that model, the work is individual, you and your stack. At a certain place of your development, environment isn't a preference. It's a structural requirement, because what you're training at that level, the source point, the ground underneath your skill, it doesn't develop in the same way in isolation. It develops exponentially through contact, through being in relationship where standards are real, where the people around you are genuinely operating from something more, where the bar is not performed or posted on the wall. It's lived as a matter of ground floor. And you cannot think your way into this. You cannot add your way into it. You just have to be around people for whom this is how they simply move, and let that do what it does in the body. It raises the floor for all, not because anyone demanded it, but that's what happens when genuine standards meet another genuine standard in the same place. It is amplification on greatness. A culture of excellence, it's not an aesthetic and it's not elitism. It isn't a mission statement or a set of rules posted somewhere visible. It's simply a set of lived orientations that are crafted to an appropriate level of mature development that people practice in small, everyday ways, big and large. Commitment over convenience, showing up when you said you would, bringing something to the environment rather than only how do I get the most for the least. Honoring the artistry, the excellence. When enough people are in the same room and they're operating from that way of orienting, something amazing happens. Everyone in the room becomes enriched in a way they would never have been alone. And it isn't because simply the program or the training demanded it. It's because the environment made it inevitable. For the right person, what I'm sharing will resonate. It isn't pressure. It's probably meeting you at a place of relief and resonance. People with standards, real ones, lived ones, they celebrate being in an environment with standards. It's the first time where they are being met in a way. Environment shapes development. At that kind of altitude, it may be the most important variable there is. All right, so I have used the metaphor ad nauseum of base camp to Everest. Look, we are not mountaineers, right? So if you're a literal person, we do not train climbing. We are an applied somatics academy who prioritize body and mind development at the source point that then you apply to your own targets that matter most: professional aims, personal development, and relationship. We are not built for the person who needs to be convinced that this kind of work matters. It's built for the person who already knows, who has already been living it, who has been doing the work quietly, consistently, often in rooms that maybe couldn't meet them where they are anymore, and who is ready for an environment that can challenge them, that is built for the kind of visionary training of what you want to create and evolve next that does not have a basic roadmap leading you to it. The work here is somatic, not because somatic is a trend, but because the source point lives in the body. The patterns that run underneath of any skill that you have developed, the ones that determine performance when the plan falls apart and your instinct takes over, those live in your body. And they don't shift only through more conversations or more insight or more things added to your Optimaxxing stack. They shift through trained experience, through the body actually changing, not just the mind understanding something new. This is also accompanied work. It isn't a course that you just move through alone or a content library that you passively consume on your schedule. The environment that we work within the Prestige is virtual, but it matters as much as anything else that happens here. The people that you would be training with in the room matter. The standards that we hold and train matters. Because what becomes possible in that container is not available very many other places, not because of exclusivity, but because of calibration. If you are that person already operating from a place of depth and devotion, and you are on the next edge of your own evolution, personally and professionally, please reach out for a conversation. It would be lovely to meet you. And if you are looking for an environment, a way of training and operating that can meet you where you are, I would welcome exploring whether this is it.